Kratesipolis disappears from history in 307 BCE. One of the most extraordinary women from the age of the Successors, Kratesipolis is unique in that she exercised power in her own right rather than serving as a regent or as an agent of a male relative. Unfortunately, our picture of Kratesipolis' life and times is rather limited, but what we do have shows us glimpses of one of the most fascinating personalities of this entire era. Kratesipolis was the wife of Alexander, son of Polyperchon. We know that Kratesipolis was a Macedonian woman, and it seems safe to assume that she was from an aristocratic house, given her marriage to the son of a mid-level successor and her reputation for being talented, which implies that she was well educated. It is also possible, although unlikely, that she was able to rise above her social station like Bernice in Egypt due to her beauty or the sum of her many virtues. We don't know when Kratesipolis was born, but she was probably younger than her husband Alexander, son of Polyperchon. Since we don't know Alexander's age, that does not give us much of a basis from which to make a good guess. Given that she was the most politically independent woman of her era, knowing her age would be useful since it would give us some kind of insight into the kinds of experiences that she might have had before she tried her hand at governance. Alexander served under his father Polyperchon in a war over the Macedonian throne and the guardianship of the two kings from the time of Antipater's death until 315. It was not the norm for women to accompany their husbands on campaign, but given Kratesipolis' energy and abilities, she might well have broken that convention. In 315, when Alexander revolted from his father and defected to Cassander, the couple seems to have headquartered themselves in the city of Sicyon. Over the course of the next year, Kratesipolis earned the trust and loyalty of her husband's Macedonian soldiers through her acts of kindness toward them. The very nature of their loyalty to a non-royal woman could mean that Kratesipolis had been cultivating a strong relationship with the troops since 319. In 314, Alexander was assassinated. The circumstances of his death are not well known, but that is because of the inadequacy of our sources on many points of detail. When a governor died, it was normal in the Hellenistic world for his subordinate to take his place, or for the sovereign to dispatch another officer to fill the void. In this particular instance, if the loyalty of the men at Sicyon was to Alexander's family, then defecting back to Alexander's father Polyperchon was presumably within the realm of possibility. However, the troops backed the widow Kratesipolis, a choice that Cassander of Macedon confirmed. This decision to elevate a woman to the status of a semi-independent governor was truly astonishing and unprecedented. While some of the Macedonian royal women had been known to have a warrior streak, and some had taken part in past regencies, none of them had officially assumed a civil or military command. Kratesipolis, of course, was not an Argead, and we have no evidence that she was serving as the guardian for a young son who would go on to be the true heir to Alexander, son of Polyperchon's small realm. The second thing that makes this appointment stunning is that while she governed a small territory, Kratesipolis' holdings were absolutely crucial to maintaining Macedon's influence in central Greece. In addition to her home base at Sicyon, Kratesipolis also controlled the strategic Acrocorinth, one of the so-called fetters of Greece, and the most contested piece of real estate in Greece during the Hellenistic era. Not only did Cassander trust Kratesipolis to have enough authority to keep her men in line and fend off constant threats against some vital positions, he was also taking an obvious gamble. Kratesipolis was renowned for her beauty, a recent widow, and in possession of two strategically desirable locations. If Kratesipolis were to remarry, it would almost certainly be to a foreign ruler, and it would result in Cassander losing his grip on central Greece. Yet, this marriage never materialized, and Kratesipolis proved to be a good choice as governor. In 313, just 1 year into her new governorship, Kratesipolis had to contend with an Antigonid invasion of Greece. By this time, Antigonus was the dominant successor, and he controlled the majority of the old empire. Sending his nephew Telesphorus into the Peloponnese, Antigonus hoped that he would expel Cassander and Polyperchon from the area and start to lay the groundwork for an overland invasion of Macedon. Cassander lost everything in the Peloponnese except for Corinth and Sicyon, the two cities governed by Kratesipolis. Telesphorus's short-lived revolt against Antigonus in 312 prevented the Antigonid forces in Greece from marching north to take Macedon in a pincer. However, by frustrating Antigonid aims while her allies were failing, Kratesipolis deserves credit for playing a part in saving Cassander from the might of Antigonus. Normally, the bulk of the credit goes to Ptolemy I for his invasion of Palestine, but Kratesipolis clearly did her part. Prior to the reconciliation of Telesphorus with his fellow Antigonid Ptolemaeus, there was probably a period of vulnerability for the Antagonids in Greece, but neither Kratesipolis nor her father-in-law Polyperchon were able to capitalize. Later, Ptolemaeus defected from his uncle Antigonus to Cassander, so he became an ally and neighbor of Kratesipolis. We do not know what the relationship between the two Antipatrid officers was like, but it is clear that Ptolemaeus' decision to defect for a second time, this time from Cassander's camp to Ptolemy's, endangered Kratesipolis' position and the balance of power in Greece. In late 309 BCE, after a few years of success and having established naval supremacy, Ptolemy I Soter arrived in Greece with an army. Just prior to this, Ptolemy had welcomed the defection of Ptolemaeus, who had gone to consult with his new master on the island of Kos. Ptolemy quickly forced Ptolemaeus to commit suicide, which accomplished two things. First, it showed that Ptolemy had limited patience for people who broke their faith, and second, it created a power vacuum in Greece, as Ptolemaeus had been stronger than either Kratesipolis or Polyperchon. Once Ptolemy landed, Kratesipolis knew that her time as a semi-independent ruler was over, and she quickly surrendered her two cities to Ptolemy. Kratesipolis was at Corinth during this time, and she knew that the men of her garrison would not allow her to surrender the city to Ptolemy, so she had to devise a ruse to fulfill her obligation to the ruler of Egypt. To introduce Ptolemy's troops into the city, Kratesipolis told her men to open the gates to admit some reinforcements that she had summoned from Sicyon. Thus, she returned the undying loyalty that her soldiers had shown for her for 5 years, with a betrayal that probably cost a number of lives. The next time we hear of Kratesipolis, she was living in the Peloponnesian city of Patrae in 307 BCE. At this time, Demetrios, the son of Antigonus, was setting up a siege of Megara. Through some sort of correspondence, or perhaps by the work of mutual friends, we learn that both Kratesipolis and Demetrios agreed to a casual encounter based on what each had heard of the other. Demetrios took off with a small force and pitched a tent near Patrae, where Kratesipolis could visit him unseen. We do not know whether the two famous Macedonians were able to scratch their mutual itch, but we do know that anti-Antigonid forces learned of Demetrius' presence and attacked him at some point during this trip, and that he was forced to flee incognito. We don't know if Kratesipolis was put into danger by this attempt on Demetrius, or whether she was even serving as a honeypot for an anti-Antigonid plot. There is no mention of what happened to Kratesipolis during this rendezvous gone wrong, and she is never mentioned again in any extant sources. At any rate, one hopes that she downloaded a better hookup app after the fiasco with Demetrius. In the absence of other evidence about how she gained the esteem of her soldiers and Cassander's trust, we are left with little alternative to the old-fashioned estimation that the combination of her beauty and personality just simply overwhelmed the men whom she encountered. The image on screen is not a statue of Kratesipolis, but perhaps it gives a general idea of what she might have looked like. At any rate, she is probably the most impressive woman of the Successor period, since she exercised more actual political and military power than any other female, and she was able to achieve that power without having been born into the Argead house or having offered her hand in marriage to some high-ranking rescuer.